few years ago, my brother Ed and I moved out of home. And within weeks, we achieved something genuinely impressive. We turned our bedrooms into a kind of domestic crime scene. Not in a quirky bachelor pad way, but in a full-blown, if my mother saw this, she would call a priest way. We weren't bad people. We weren't even lazy in a traditional sense. We just lived day to day. And the bedroom was a place where good intentions went to die. The bed was never made. The sheets were ancient. And somehow we convinced ourselves this was normal. Until one day we had a small realization. If we wanted a love life, we probably needed to get our sheets together. And yes, I know exactly how that sounds, but also it's accurate. Now, most people in that moment would do the normal thing. They'll go to the store, they'll buy some sheets, they'll go home, they'll forget about it. We did not do that. We did what two underqualified, overconfident brothers would do when confronted with an everyday problem. We said, surely we can redesign the whole experience of bedding, which is objectively ridiculous, but it ended up teaching us something that I didn't understand at the time, something that now shapes how I see human behaviour and how we design just about everything. Because here's what we assume at first. We assume the problem was us. We assume we needed more discipline, more motivation, more adulting. And the world encourages that assumption. When people don't follow through on something that's good for them, the default explanation is they must not care enough. So we lecture them, we remind them, we motivate them, we shame them a little, and then we act surprised when behaviour doesn't change. But what if the story was wrong? What if it's not a motivation problem? What if it's a design problem? What if the real issue is we keep building systems for a calm, organised, fully functioning version of a human who does not exist? And then we punish the real human for failing to live up to the imaginary one. That question sounds obvious, but it isn't how most things are designed. Let's start with the fitted sheet. The personal nemesis of many otherwise capable adults. The fitted sheet is one of the greatest everyday scams ever pulled on humanity. A psychological test disguised as homeware. Because it looks simple, but the moment you try to put it on a bed, it becomes this chaotic geometry puzzle. And there's this moment, you know the one, where you think you've nailed it, and then you've realised you've put it on sideways. So you rip it off, you rotate it, you wrestle it back on, and you do this while quietly questioning your intelligence. That experience isn't rare, it's common. So we thought, why are we all tolerating this? And we did something incredibly unglamorous. We added corner tags, tiny directional markers, so you instantly know which corner goes where. No app, no instructions, no user education, just a simple cue that reduces friction at exactly the moment it normally shows up. And what's interesting is this, it's not that people suddenly became more motivated to make their bed, it's that we stopped making them fight the sheet first. We didn't fix motivation, we fixed the moment where motivation goes to die. There was another place we noticed friction, and it wasn't on the bed at all. It was what happened after folding the fitted sheet. Or more accurately, not folding the fitted sheet. Because fitted sheets don't fold, they submit. Eventually, after you threaten them, people told us they could finally make the bed easily, but then everything fell apart again at the linen cupboard. Sizes got mixed up, sets got separated, and the fitted sheet inevitably escaped and became a crumpled mystery object on its own. So, instead of teaching people how to fold better, we asked the same question again. Where's the friction? And the answer wasn't skill, it was storage. So we redesigned the sheet to include a simple pouch built into the sheet itself, so the whole set could be contained, identified and put away without needing a special technique. It can't get lost because it's part of the sheet. Once again, behaviour changed, not because people tried harder, but because the system stopped fighting them. Now, I want to be very clear, this is not a talk about beds. Beds just happen to be the place where Ed and I started noticing something bigger, because once you see friction clearly, you start seeing it everywhere. And you start noticing how often we blame people for failing when the real issue is the system. At the time, I didn't have language for what we were doing. Quick aside, when I say design, I don't mean cushions and colour palettes. I mean the invisible decisions that shape what happens next, the tiny details that decide whether a real, tired, busy human actually follows through or quietly gives up and tells themselves it's a motivation problem. I only found the language later through behavioural economics, where friction describes the small barriers that have an outsized impact on behaviour. And when I found this concept, it was like someone turned on the lights, because I hadn't discovered some hidden truth about motivation. I just stopped getting in people's way. Here's the principle we kept coming back to. When behaviour matters, design for ease before you ask for effort, because people avoid friction more reliably than they pursue good intentions. That's not a character flaw, that's just being human. And friction isn't always physical. Sometimes it's emotional. Think about the last time you wanted to check in on someone but didn't know how to start. That pause, that awkward moment where you overthink the first message. That hesitation is friction. Or think about the last time you considered asking for help, but you didn't want to explain yourself, or you didn't want to look needy, or you didn't want to make it a thing. That hesitation is friction. So we end up in a world full of good intentions and a graveyard of follow through. Not because people don't care, but because we keep designing the first step to be awkward, effortful, confusing, or exposing, and then we label the person unmotivated. There's another piece of this that surprised us, because when we remove friction, we don't just help the average person, we also help the people who've been silently excluded by design. When we improved how the sheet was handled, how you grip it, orientate it, pull it into place, we didn't just help the busy people, we helped people with dexterity challenges, people with disabilities, people who want independence in their own space. That's when it hit me. We often design for the 80% and assume the rest will figure it out. But that's not neutral. That's a design choice, and it has consequences. And once we understood this, we started applying it beyond the product, even inside the business, because the same pattern shows up at work all the time. When something important isn't happening, the instinct is to push harder, motivate more, remind more, measure more, pressure more. But often, the better question is, where are we making this harder than it needs to be? Is the information hard to access? Is it unclear what good looks like? Is it risky to speak up? Is the process clunky? Because if the system makes the right behaviour hard, you can't culture your way out of that, you can't motivational speech your way out of that, you have to redesign. So here's what I want to leave you with. The next time something important isn't happening in your team, your workplace, your home, your health, your relationships, resist the instinct to push harder. Pause and ask yourself a different question. Where am I making this harder than it needs to be? Because when you remove friction, people often do the rest themselves. And sometimes the change you're looking for doesn't require more willpower, it requires better design. Thank you.